Hey everyone, welcome to the channel. My name is Alan, and if this is your first time watching, on this channel I talk about all things nature and nature photography, so thanks for watching. I am out in 100 plus degree weather today, braving a heat wave that is sizzling the entire United States right now from coast to coast. I've got a good 15 minutes in me before my entire face melts off, so I'm gonna make this a very efficient video. I am here today to talk to you about a lens that I've been testing out. Astute viewers of this channel will know that I've been testing a 2-lens setup for birding and wildlife lately, and one of those is the 800 PF, which I will link to my review of above. The other, though, is the lens that I want to talk about today, and it is the 400 4.5. Now, I've had this little dream of a lens for about a month now, and I have taken plenty of example images that I plan to show you today. And we will get to those, but for the sake of efficiency, because again, I will have a heat stroke if I'm out here for 10 more minutes, I want to run through exactly what this review will cover today. First, we're going to go through the lens specifications, because you can't have a review without lens specs. Then I'm going to show you some example photos that I took at a lovely bird park called Sylvan Heights. After that, I'm going to show you some examples of video as well as examples that I took with the 1.4 times teleconverter at this awesome air show in my state where they fly these 1940s era old propeller planes, and it's a lot of fun. I got some really fun photos from that. After that, I'm going to show you some comparison shots between the 400 4.5, both with and without the teleconverter, compared to both the 300 and 500 PF, both with and without the teleconverters. And then finally, I will tie everything up in a bow and give you my general thoughts about this lens. But before we get into all of that, I'm going to drink about a gallon of water, and then we'll come back and talk a little bit about the initial conversation that took place when this lens was released about a year ago, because I think that conversation will answer some fundamental questions about who this lens might be for. So let's go get some water, and I'll meet you back out here in a minute. Okay, I am hydrated, so let's talk a little bit about the initial conversation that I remember when this lens was first released. And it all revolved around the question, why did Nikon make this lens? Who is it for? And I think the root cause for that question has to do with how many equivalent focal length lenses are already out there. At the time, they had just released the 100 to 400, and there was already a 400 2.8 with a built-in teleconverter, both excellent lenses. And I think the question's even more pertinent now because we've also now got the 180 to 600 in the mix. So how many 400mm lenses does Nikon need to put out? And when I watched all of those initial reviews of the lens and watched reviewers ask that exact question, I tended to agree. I really couldn't see what the niche for this lens was. But now that I'm in this predicament where I am looking for a really simple 2-lens setup, and I want it to all be native Z mount, and I need to be able to use a teleconverter, and I want a prime, I might be the target audience that Nikon is looking for. Ever since I revealed that I was testing this lens, I had several people reach out and suggest that I just try the 100 to 400 or the 180 to 600 instead. And I understand that sentiment. Those lenses are a better value probably, and you get the flexibility of a zoom. And I think for most people, those lenses are going to be the best option. I think I'm actually in the minority in that I actually prefer the fast prime over the flexibility of a zoom, which is why the lens just kind of spoke to me. All right, but I've gotten us off topic. I'm not actually making this video to justify why I bought this lens, but I do think that conversation about why does this lens exist might help you to think about whether or not you are the target audience for this lens. If you want the flexibility of a zoom, look at the 180 to 600 or the 100 to 400. If you want a fast prime with the potential option to use a teleconverter, you might want to look at that 400 4.5. And with that, I have provided enough context. Let's go look at the specs of this lens, and then I'm going to get inside before my entire body melts into a puddle. The first thing that I noticed when I picked up this lens is just how small and light it is. Coming in at just 2.74 pounds, this is one of the lightest telephotos Nikon has ever made. If a lightweight telephoto setup is important to you, This is a lens to seriously consider. At the bottom of the lens, we've got a memory set button, which I've found more and more useful for setting and returning to a focus point, such as a branch that a bird might fly to or from. We've also got a custom function button, which I have set to that memory recall. Below that, there's an auto and manual focus switch and a focus limiter switch. The lens also has a removable lens foot, and the collar will smoothly rotate 360 degrees. The focus rings and control rings are smooth and functional and on par with other Z-mount lenses. The top of the lens has 4 programmable buttons that are all linked together and cannot be programmed separately. The lens hood is made of a durable rubber material, which is a nice change after I cracked the plastic lens hood of my 500PF on a boulder. The lens has a 95mm filter thread for filters, built-in vibration reduction, and professional coatings. For a size comparison, here it is next to the 500PF and also the 300PF, and please note this is without the FTZ adapter. Alright, so now that we've been through the lens specs, we're going to move on and I'm going to show you some example photos that I took at Sylvan Heights Bird Park. As you can see, this lens is incredibly sharp, even wide open. In fact, it's one of the sharpest telephotos I've ever used. I also appreciate the maximum aperture of 4.5, making it really handy for lower light situations. There are just no compromises in terms of sharpness and rendering when it comes to this prime. I didn't get a lot of time to test it with the teleconverter at Sylvan Heights, so in this next section, I'm going to show you some examples that I took at the Flying Circus, which is an air show in Northern Virginia that has all of these fantastic World War II era planes just flying around and doing stunts and tricks. So let's move on and check out the air show. Alright, so for the third part of this video, I want to do some comparisons between the 400 4.5 and two of my favorite lenses of all time, the 300 PF and the 500 PF. And to accomplish this, I went inside and I got one of my new favorite things, which is a Lego set of a belted kingfisher. I just adore this thing. I had my daughter put it together, and I set it outside on a table, grabbed the lenses and their teleconverters, and I took a bunch of comparison shots so that you can judge for yourself the differences in sharpness, contrast, etc. So I'll put some side-by-sides on the screen now, and we'll get into the comparisons. First up, we have a comparison against the 300 PF. For the sake of time, by the way, I'm only showing comparisons of these lenses wide open. You can see here that both lenses are very sharp, and I'd be more than happy with the results from either. When I added the 1.4 times teleconverter to the 300 PF though, results were considerably more soft. Here I prefer the 400 over the 300 with the teleconverter. Next, I added a teleconverter to the 400 as well, and you can see that the Z-mount 1.4 times teleconverter is excellent. The softening effects are very minimal compared to the F-mount version. Here's the 400 with and without the teleconverter side by side. You can see the softening, but it's very slight and the image is still acceptable. Next up we have the 400 against the 500. Both images again look very sharp. I actually can't decide which one I like more here. The rendering does seem warmer on the 500, but I believe that the light just wasn't actually as controlled as I had thought. Last, here's the 400 and the 500, both with teleconverters. The rendering on the 500 holds up surprisingly well, but there is still significant softening on the eye. All in all, I think that all of these lenses are excellent on their own, and the real difference maker here isn't the lenses themselves, but the teleconverter. The Z-mount teleconverter is just that much better than the F-mount version. Alright, so I hope you found those comparisons to be helpful. I personally find the 400 4.5 to be just as sharp as the 300 PF and the 500 PF, and I don't feel like I'm missing out on anything in terms of image quality or rendering when I use it out in the field. And I also think that it has the added bonus of a much better teleconverter experience, giving it the slight edge. But with all of that said, for the last part of this video, I want to take all of my thoughts and neatly wrap a bow around them for you so that you can leave with my pros and cons list for this lens. Starting with the pros. The biggest pros for this lens in my mind are: one, it's lightweight and small, and if you are looking for a small, lightweight experience, if you're hiking or you just can't carry a lot of weight, you can't beat this in terms of a 400mm lens. I also think the image quality and rendering, with it being a prime, is fantastic. And third, the wide aperture of 4.5 makes it maybe not a 2.8, but good enough for me when it comes to lower light situations. So in my mind, those are the top strengths of this lens. In terms of cons, there is one big glaring con with this lens, and it doesn't have anything to do with the quality of the lens, the build construction, sharpness, rendering, anything like that. The con has everything to do with the price. There isn't really a way to sugarcoat this. The lens is expensive. I think a little too expensive if you ask me. For example, compared to the 100 to 400, which has the additional flexibility of a zoom and image quality and rendering that is basically on par with the 400 4.5, or so I hear, the 400 4.5 is $500 more. So for all of that extra money, you get less flexibility and almost the same image quality. I just don't see why this would be a value for anyone unless you're like me and you specifically are just being stubborn and you want that fast prime. So if having a fast prime is at the top of your priority list, or you're trying to shave off every gram for weight that you possibly can, because again, this is the lightest 400mm lens that Nikon has ever made, then the 400 4.5 makes sense, and maybe you want to shell out the extra $500 for the lens. Otherwise, if you are happy to have the flexibility of a zoom, you're okay with the image quality being basically on par with the prime, and you're not so worried about the weight, save yourself $500 and consider the 100 to 400 instead. All right, so that about wraps up this review for the 400 4.5. I am done cooking out here in the sun, and as you can probably hear, a nice, strong hurricane force wind has come in at the last minute to save me from this heat. So I'm gonna take advantage of that, pack everything up in the car, and head on out of here. If you found this review helpful, please consider subscribing to the channel and liking this video so that YouTube sends it to more people. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one, hopefully after this heat wave is over.